This is the Flavor of Leadership podcast. I am your host, Clint Hoops. Together, we explore the unique blend of leadership wisdom that helps top leaders consistently achieve work goals, develop personally, and find fulfillment with family. Let's get started. Welcome to the Flavor of Leadership podcast. This is episode number 16. Today, we're going to be talking about how to make sure that we are applying leadership ideas and principles properly in our roles as leaders. Each week, my wife, she makes bread for our family. And, it's fun. She will often have the kids help out. And, so she'll get the flour out, get the yeast out, get the water, put it together, and out comes wonderful bread, right? At least that's how my kids see it, right? All you have to do is mix all the ingredients together and it'll turn out wonderfully. My little 2-year-old, he, a while back, was kind of up, just kind of walking around, just kind of quiet. You know how that is when the little one, they're usually screaming and yelling, and then all of a sudden they're quiet and you think, oh, well, that's nice. They're just playing on their own. But then you start thinking a little bit like, ooh, maybe I should be worried when they're quiet. And so we found out later, he had gotten up to the sink. He knows how to get the cups and he can actually get himself a little cup of water on his own, and it's usually no big deal. But on this day, he got up a couple of times. We're thinking, wait, he's not drinking that much water. So he fills up some water and we follow him, and he goes into our pantry. And in our pantry, we have a big bucket full of flour, and that's where my wife gets her flour to be able to make her bread. And he knows this. And we go in and follow him and find out that her big 5-gallon bucket full of flour that she used to make bread is now also full of many little cups of water from our little boy. He was there just doing his best to copy his mother, right? He knows that you need the flour and you need the water. And once you do, you mix those together and it makes a nice sticky dough and you can have bread. You mix it up with your hands and it's great. Oh man, we weren't quite as excited about that when we saw that. 'Cause we're thinking, oh no, we just ruined a whole bucket full of flour. But as I started thinking about it a little bit later, I thought, oh man, there's something we got to be able to pull from this. And I couldn't help but think after this, he had great intentions. He just wanted to be able to do what his mother did, right? He saw that she could make wonderful bread out of that flour and water together, and he was just doing his best to do the same thing. The problem is he was copying some of the right actions, but he didn't have the full picture. He didn't know everything he needed to know in order to produce the great bread. He was missing a few very key things. And so, have you seen that as a leader before? Have you seen a leader that you've respected do something great? You see their actions that they do and you think, wow, they are wonderful. They got a great response from those they lead. And after that, you thought, wow, I should do the same thing, whatever that is, right? I know I've done that, where I've seen a leader that I respect do something, some action, and I think, wow, that's amazing. I need to do the same thing. Sometimes this is the best way to learn, seeing others successfully do what we want to do. But we also need the full picture so that we know the principles behind the action, right? Just like my little boy. He saw something that was great and he wanted to replicate it, but he didn't have all of the principles, all of the things he needed to know before he started on the action. Leadership, same thing with us. We see a leader we respect doing something great, see the actions they take. But sometimes if we don't have all of the other pieces, we can fail. I know I've had that before where I've seen a leader be incredibly focused, incredibly charismatic, incredibly, fill in the blank, whatever trait or whatever something I want to have, or the way that they interact with their team, they're able to hold them accountable in ways that I wasn't able to do. And I'd see them do that. And sometimes I would look at the way they delivered it in a meeting and forget that much of the leadership that needed to happen happened outside of that meeting. The meeting is just where it was implemented. So if I went with my team and did just the piece that I saw in the meeting without all of the backup, all of the things, all the buildup that needed to happen to make sure people know and trust, I'd likely fail. I've seen people take leadership ideas such as, management by walking around, or organization to a different level, delegation, servant leadership, and many other principles and ideas, and implement them in ways that are sometimes unhealthy, sometimes even harmful to themselves and to the teams they lead. These leadership ideas and actions that seem so great, if not implemented properly, can actually cause more harm than good. I've seen this in other managers that I've led, where I explained to them or told them a story about something that I have done in the past and how it went so well. Or, hey, maybe you should consider doing this in your leadership, only to have them not implement it correctly and end up actually harming them worse. When I first learned about servant leadership, when I was early in my career, I remember trying to implement it. I remember thinking, this seems right. Being there to serve people, help people, this feels right. And it felt like a true thing. It felt like something I should do. And as a new leader, I began to implement this, at least what I thought was servant leadership, or what it should be in my mind. And in the end, it began to result in my enabling people to underperform. As what would happen is they would know that I would often bail them out because I'd be there to serve them and help them. So I would often bail them out, or be there to fix the mess when they didn't perform, or they weren't performing up to the level that they knew they should. There's nothing wrong with serving people and helping people, and especially those you lead. But if you take the other true principles of accountability and work out of it, then it's just not going to work. It just will not work. I've seen other leaders that confuse being busy with being effective. They'll tout their endless to-do list or task list and their incredibly full schedule, but they often won't even deliver on the results that they're being measured with, whether those are financial or otherwise. So they'll be so busy because that's what they felt like they needed to do. They've seen other effective leaders that are incredibly busy, but they forget to keep themselves busy with the things that will have the biggest impact. They forget that true principle that they have to have in being effective, and feel like they're being effective just because they're busy. There are a lot of leadership ideas that may ring true to you. Whether you read a book or listen to this podcast or other podcasts, or you work with someone else and you see them do something and you think, okay, that rings true to me. That's something I want to implement. Go ahead and look for the underlying principles and make sure the actions that you're wanting to do are matching up with the result you are seeking. Now, that seems so simple, right? But it will often get confusing when you see someone else implement it with their team when you don't have the full picture. Sometimes a slight shift in implementation can make a world of difference in the effectiveness of your actions, or just the opposite, right? It'll make it ineffective by not implementing it correctly, just a slight shift. We've discussed this in the past and talked about how much of effective leadership, how much it is just proper communication, and how our actions do, in fact, often speak much louder than words, especially to those that we lead. So as you go back to your teams this week, or as you're doing your reading with leadership, or as you're observing other great leaders that you want to be like, take the time to figure out what the principle is and figure out the best way to implement that with your team. You got this. Until next week. Thanks for joining me on this week's episode of the Flavor of Leadership podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please share it with a friend. And if you haven't already, subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast player. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback for us, you can reach me directly at flavorofleadership.com. Thanks for listening.